Welcome to another episode of Fair Folk at Work. One of the neat things about the fair was that it was really a village in that you were responding to the people around you, what they had done previously, what they had made. And my guest today is one of the people that laid that foundation at the fair, Mr. Danny Garland. Danny, how's it going?
I'm well, thank you.
Let me start off with the traditional
Sure.
first Fair Folk at Work question, which is who was the person who said to you, there's this thing called fair, and what did they say to get you out there?
Well, I was in high school. It was 1964. So if he had said anything about fair, I wouldn't have known what the hell he was talking about. He was a high school teacher, Mr. Regulato. He taught English and he would take us to concerts and the ballet and all kinds of things like that. So he was always enriching us. And one day he said, be in the parking lot on Saturday at 8 o'clock. We're going to go somewhere. And even if he had said, we're going to go to the fair, we wouldn't have known what the hell he was talking about because it was really one of the first years. And it was in Haskell's Rascals or something. It was very hilly and they had separate parking and they shuttled us over in buses and they had mimes on the buses. But we got there and we looked around and we said, you mean we could have worn costumes? And I have to tell you, two of the other people that went that day were Steve Gillen, who's now the chief of the Celts, and Ray Tatter, who was entertainment director in the early 70s. So that one trip was a turning point for all of us. I became a customer every year after that. What?
What high school did you go to?
St. Paul and Whittier. It was sort of catty corner to Sierra High School, which was also in Whittier.
So you drove all the way from Whittier to basically Hollywood, or
Yeah. And we do that every year. We moved to from Whittier, we moved to La Habra, but we went every year as customers. And the year that Ray was entertainment director, I think he got us in free, and he gave us banners to carry in a parade and stuff like that. But I was
what's your first memory of fair, either as a sensation or something you ate or saw?
Well, I think the first was incense. It was the first time I had smelled, and I think it was copal. It was the first time I had smelled it outside of church. And I thought, oh, that's good. And another time, I was in a booth that was selling prints, engravings, stuff like that. And somebody brought them a thing of halva wrapped in paper and set it down on the counter. And he was cutting it up. He said, do you want some? And I, as being a little Irish boy, I had no idea what halva was. So I said, okay, yeah. And I had some and I loved it. I've loved it ever since. But just the generosity of people at fair struck me right from the beginning.
Did you get a sense that this was a different place?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because I came from a very white bread, brand new suburban neighborhood in Santa Fe Springs. And being an art student, I was aware of the bohemian, whatever, that kind of influence. So I understood it right away when I got there.
What was the point when you said to yourself, I could come out here and participate more than just with a pass, but I
Right.
could be part of it?
Well, I was living by myself in 66 in beautiful, can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, and there was a ceramic shop right around the corner from where I lived. So I would go in there and get clay and make stuff, and she would fire it for me. And she had Egyptian paste. You know what Egyptian paste is?
No, I don't.
It's a self-glazing ceramic product. It's really hard to work with. It's kind of like frosting or something. If you pat it, it just slumps. So I made some Egyptian medallions, like cartouches, cartouches.
Right.
And I was going to sell them at fair, and I sent them my $5 to be a street peddler, and I never heard back from them. This was in the year they were in Thousand Oaks when they got in trouble with Mrs. Walter Brennan for being hippies and nudity and drugs and all that stuff.
I
Uh,
interviewed Judy Corey
yeah,
and has distinct memories of how she insulted the Brennans and got the fair kicked out of
did
whatever they.
personally, did she know who they were?
I believe she assured me with a straight face
Hmm.
that it was something about a cock crowing and it was getting harder or something. And she assured me that it was quite period and innocent. And she was quite amazed that the Brennans took offense at it.
I know you would think being actor of an actor family, they'd be a little more liberal, but I think there's all kinds of actors.
So, anyways, you sent your $5.
I sent my $5 in and I never heard back from them. So I had my mom drive me out to the fair, and it was during all this brouhaha. And I have a feeling that Ron was being pestered by all kinds of people, press and everybody. And it was at the end of the day, and he was taking down banners at the front of the fair. And I tried to talk to him, and he just ignored me. So I charged it up to, it was not a good day for him. But I was a customer up through the 70s, and then I moved to Whittier, and I sort of got out of it. And then I moved to Pasadena, and common friend between me and Steve Gillen, who is now in with St. Andrews, said in 1980, she said, "You want to come out to the fair? We'll dress you, get you in. You can play all day. It won't cost you anything." And I said, "Sure." So I went and played with the Celts for at least 2 years. And I think the third year I decided to actually join them. And I was the one that came up with the Saints banners they carry in parades because I would see them marching around. I think they need something, some kind of visual, give them some pizzazz. So those were all the mine to start out with. There have been subsequent people copying that style.
What was your inspiration for the guild banners?
Research.
Hmm.
I am a Capricorn, so I'm all about research. Almost anything I do, even if I know all about it already, I have to go and do some at least visual research. So they're saints. I simplified them a lot. They're very flattened, very stylized, very long. The first ones we did on this polyester wool, gray sort of wool tweedy fabric. And we did it in real wool, and they were stored in someone's garage, and the real wool rotted, but the base stayed there. And I had painted in acrylic on the fabric. So I was with the Celts for 10 years, marching around with a pike, doing all that stuff, clapping on main stage. And then after 10 years of doing that, I had enough.
Did
It's
you
like,
ever go back to vending ceramics on the street, or
no,
did that
no,
ever?
no. I moved away from there. I moved away from my source, so I didn't have that ladies, kill to use anymore. So I wasn't doing that. Then after the kilts, I helped a lady. I taught her how to make leather masks. I was working at a costume shop, and I came up with a way of making masks on styrene bases using suede or stretchy fabric or whatever. You might have heard of the shop I worked at. It was called Somewhere in Time in Pasadena. I was down in the basement making stuff. If it wasn't clothes, if it was the head or hands or feet or shoes or whatever, I was making those parts. But I was the main designer. If they wanted something drawn, I was the one that drew it for them.
Were
And
you in school all at this time, or just
oh no, I got out of school, let's see, sometime in the mid 70s. I was going to Cypress JC learning theater design and fine arts at the same time.
Mhm.
So that's where my stage design smarts comes from, is having fine art background and theater design. Because I think a lot of theater designers don't have art history backgrounds, they don't have that to draw from.
What shows slash other booths, what visually impacted you at fair when you were
Uh,
at this stage?
I really liked the sculpture. There were a lot of guys doing like iron, welded iron and stuff. Really liked those. And there was somebody in the 70s, a guy who was doing some kind of prints. I don't know if they were serigraphs, but they were like processions of medieval ladies in the woods or something. I really liked those. I have no idea who that was. And there was ceramics that was airbrush that had like rainbow colors on a white body. I really like those.
If I were to have asked you in 1985,
Yeah.
what is the overall style of the Renaissance Fair?
Mm, mm. Kind of sort of artsy, craftsy, renaissancey without being too technically authentic, you know. It looks that way because if it was totally authentic, people wouldn't be able to read the signs or something, you know. My mantra with signs, because I did signs for a while, was it has to be legible and semi-period, you know, period enough, but legible.
Did you ever talk to Phyllis about, or who sort of informed you what was the Gestalt of Fair?
Ooh, uh, well, I did take Phyllis's History of Fair class workshop in DeVore, early in DeVore. But I also had dinner with her. I had dinner with her and she and Heidi B. That was very interesting. It was up at the Green Man where I am now at Rover's
Mhm.
house, but it was when Jim Kelly owned it. I also used to listen to KPFK when they were associated with the fair, and they would talk about it a lot. And they would have the program, the folio, which was the program of the radio station, but it also was the program for the fair. The center was the map and it had lists of shows and stuff. So I was getting it through there. And they also had things they would mail you, costume guides and stuff like that. So I was getting it through that, I think, before I actually worked there. And then after working with the mask lady,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Do you remember any pearls of wisdom about what Phyllis was trying to do? Did she have some opinions on the look and feel and design of the fair?
I never heard her say anything like that. And I don't know that she knew. I don't think I had a reputation then when I met her of doing stuff at fair, even though I had done stuff. But I think I was on my own track about what things should look like, you know, because I knew about the media that they use, you know, tempera or gouache or whatever it was they were using, and what colors they had, and where the colors came from, and how they were produced. So it wasn't just guessing, and I could reproduce it, but I would rather just use acrylics or something. You know, it's a little more user friendly. No, I think I was on my own, picking and choosing about what I thought was authentic and what I thought was totally wrong.
After you designed the banners for the different guilds, what was your next project?
For the Celts, they had a 9 pins game that they wanted to look like a hellmouth. So I painted a hellmouth on 8 or 10 vertical planks with the mouth cut out. And then a backdrop of yellow fabric with black little devils. And they put it up this last year in their Celt camp. It's still around, but it was based on medieval illuminated manuscripts. And then I was sort of not doing anything. I think I was hanging out with Jim and Jennifer at the Green Man Florals booth because I got to be friends with them in 90 or 91. And then in 2001, I got a call from Bud Coffee asking me if I wanted to come and paint signs for the fair because he got connected me from Nell Blackwell and Steve Gillen because Steve Gillen did signs for a while. So I went and painted signs, and Lisa Stell saw what I was doing, and she told AJ Hoffman, who was the head of production, she said he should be doing sets, not signs. He's too good. So the first set I did was in Devore. It had previously been a Mud Man set, and they weren't there this year, so they covered up the mud pit, threw up some kind of backdrop. And I designed it, and I think I painted it in 3 days. And it was at the front of the fair, so people were driving in the morning. They'd wave and say hi. Then they would be amazed at the end of the day how much I had gotten done.
So
But
you were an attraction as well as a set
yeah,
designer.
yeah. But it's because, oh, there were an older couple in Irwindale who I called the quote unquote painters. And they did a set. I don't know who hired them. I was Ricky or somebody hired them to paint this set. And it took them 2 months, I think, to paint this set. And I knew why. They were using like pieces of corrugated cardboard as a palette to mix acrylics on, which is totally stupid because the cardboard's going to soak up all the water. And they were had bad color sense, and it was just bad. I called it Sunset on Mars. I think the lady was the one who painted these wispy little flowers that grew out of the cracks in the rocks that if you were at the foot of the stage, you couldn't even see them. They were so wispy. So over that, I painted, and I think they're still using this set. It's got two arches. It was the Felicity stage this last year in Irwindale. It's brown, sort of neoclassical arches, and there's an arch in the middle. It's the actual door, and there's two arches on either side that looks like you can see a landscape through those
Oh
arches.
yeah.
That's over Sunset on Mars, which I took pictures of just to show people how bad it was. The sky was yellow and purple. It was bad.
When
Yeah.
you look at sets you have designed, are you the kind of person who sees what you should have done better?
Oh,
Or
yes, all the time. Yeah.
do you ever say, wow, I nailed that?
No, no, sometimes I do. Well, sometimes I will see it in the back of a photograph. I go, oh, that's pretty. Oh, I painted that. But I think any artist, when they look at their stuff, sees the mistakes. And I know that it's just me that sees them, that nobody else sees them. So I don't worry about it. It's that theater thing, because I've done enough plays that it's frantic until the minute the curtain goes up. And then after the curtain goes up, everything's fine. When I was with the Celts, we would do these parties that were sometimes very elaborately decorated as like a Victorian dinner dance, right?
Mhm.
And what the other officers said, it's amazing. You're running around here, putting everything up, but once it starts, it's like you're a whole different person. I say, but that's because there's nothing you can do about it once the curtain goes up. You have to let it go.
What set have you designed that you see the fewest amounts of mistakes on?
Probably the Fool stage in Irwindale. It's mostly blue with a sun burst in the middle and little red and yellow and blue stars going around the top. I designed that specifically for Mooney and Brune because I knew Mooney's in red and white and black, and Brune is in black and red, and neither of those colors on the set. But I also wanted to make it look kind of circusy, and it's actually plywood. People think it's canvas because I painted it to look like canvas. It's saggy. You can see the bottom is uneven and it curls back. The people across the street who were putting up their booth were talking to the crew. They said, "Isn't that dangerous having all that canvas with them juggling fire?" I said, "It's plywood." Both of them really, really liked it. They even wrote, because I wrote on the back. I write on the back of the set, dedication or something. But I told them it was just for them, and I hope they liked it. And they both really, really, I think they both signed it on the back too.
How did you get involved with the Fools Guild?
Oh dear. Oh, that's an interesting story. We went to the 2001 reunion in Agora. And I went with Christina Fay, who used to work with different people. We went there and we ran into Jim Kelly, who I'd met the year before at Debbie Cable's booth. And he had just bought a house, which is this house. He had a friend, a new friend of his, Jerry Fitzgerald. On the way out after the reunion, we ran into this guy and he said, "Are you going to come to the Fool's Party?" And said, "Well, we didn't know anything about it." Said, "It's in Burbank. It's Arabian Nights and it's Feast of Fools." I said, "Okay." So that sounded fun. So we went to that. And the whole time I'm sitting there at the party, I'm looking around thinking, I could do a better party than this. And then a couple of years later, I actually did. Actually did a lot of parties for the Fools. Maybe, I don't know, I want to say maybe 30 parties, major productions, all different kinds of themes. Most of them can't do anymore because they're culturally appropriation. We had India and Arabia and China.
What
Lots of,
part of your artistic soul responds to the Renaissance fair and which part responds to fool's parties?
I think the Renaissance fair is a little simpler, not quite so loud. Well, I don't have any control over light. It's
Right.
daylight. There's nothing I can do about that. So in some cases, I will paint shadows into the set because I know there's no way I'm going to get a spotlight with a gobo or something. And then the fool's parties are the themes are a challenge. The themes and the venues that we have. A lot of the parties I did were at the Burbank Moose, which is this auditorium that's has absolutely no architecture whatsoever. It's just this box and a tiny little stage with no wings, no flies, no backstage, just a little stage. And we did some spectacular parties there. We just transformed the whole damn room into something else with paper and fabric and lights and props. The membership of the Fools Guild is such a resource because we'll ask for some stuff, like, I don't know, potted plants or animals or almost anything, and somebody will bring some. It's great.
Is there any difference in designing something for the fair that has to sort of be lived in day after day after day versus a fool's guild? It's up for the night and then
Oh,
it's
yeah. Well, for the fair, I always think about weather. The sets are all sealed, and I'm particularly particular about the edges, the top edges that get sealed so that the water doesn't get in. And you have no control. You can't run out and throw something over the set if it starts to rain. It's just going to get wet. That's all there is to it. Whereas full scale parties are totally ephemeral. A lot of it just gets taken down and thrown away because it's mostly just paper and it's all illusion. All these, theater people that know and movie people that know it's all an illusion. So let's do the illusion.
but they seem to do it really well and with a sense of humor.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing serious. In fact, there was a lady at the pirate party, at James's pirate party, and there was a big chest at the front of the venue that was full of sand and prizes in the sand. You had to dig around in the sand to find whatever James had put in there. So some lady that we don't know was not a regular fool was looking for something in the chest and got her ass touched. I don't know if it was a goose or a pinch or just a pat, but she got all incensed. She wanted her money back. We were all thinking, honey, you're at the wrong party. Because I would think at a fool's party, if you bend over and nobody touches your butt, you'd get incensed.
Do you have any favorite foods out at fair?
I like the Greek food salad and the falafels because it's fresh and you can't fake fresh. And it's always good and they're nice people. I haven't had a turkey leg since 1985.
Aside from people who bang the iron, what were other crafts booths?
Ooh, the ceramics, because had been doing ceramics. I'm always impressed with, really well done ceramics. The paper dyeing guy. I always loved that. It always looked like too big of a mess for me to start doing it on my own. The weavers, maybe all the needle arts, embroidery and the sewing. Well, clothes, I'm crazy for clothes. So I always stayed away from all the clothing booths because I knew how expensive they were because I could make my own.
If you were to make your own costume
Uh,
now, what class or
Probably a little higher middle class.
mhm,
I've been knighted, and I have actually a really fancy green doublet that I did. Pains at the shoulder.
mhm.
Between those, it's like a green woven fabric, but between the panes, it's damask. It's a green damask,
Is it a
and
dark green?
it's a emerald green.
Okay.
It's a little different shade than the other one, but it's shinier and it's got a design on it. And then it's all edged in copper. Well, the whole thing started with this fabric I found because in a trash can in front of an upholstery shop. I think it was maybe 8 inches wide and maybe 2 feet long. This yellow and orange floral craziness, foliate, but very period because it's woven, it wasn't printed. So that became the lining of the sleeves, and the cover of all the buttons was that sort of brown, copper and yellow fabric. But I think I had to go back 3 times to the fabric store to get enough braid.
You often let the materials suggest the final product.
Oh yeah, or I go looking for it. I had a pair of big pants, like those big Dutch pants,
Hmm.
needed heavy kind of damaged material, and I probably went to 4 different places before I found a this brown kind of monk's cloth, but a little finer weave than that. It's got a very simple repeat floral thing in it. And I think I got all they had, which was like almost a half a yard and not enough. So I had to make it stretch.
What gives you more joy, working in costumes and fabric or working on stages and props?
Probably, I don't know, it's probably equal. I can't say anyone is better because they're just different. So one is pencil, paper, and paint, and the other one is fabric.
Which part of you is attracted to fabric and which part of you is attracted to buildings?
Well, I think the tactile part is fabric because when I'm going shopping for fabric, I don't just look at it, I feel it. So it's a very tactile kind of thing. And I think the stage set part is seeing people performing in it. I try not to. Sometimes it doesn't actually come out this way, but I try not to upstage the performers. I try to make a frame for them to do whatever they're going to do. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes I get carried away. It's kind of like doing a painting and then having somebody performing in front of it, because that's what it is. I like it when the performers like the stages. So I try to not upstage them or hobble them in any way. Try to make it easy, stay out of their way.
When you talk about tactile fabric, are you thinking of tactile in the sense of how it looks as it flows, or tactile in the sense of how does it feel on someone's skin?
Well, the skin is partly, but partly it's how is it going to hang? Is it stiff? Is it wrinkly? Is it flowy? And is it going to look better this way or this way? Because,
Mhm.
dot bias, hanging something on the bias is different than hanging it square. So there's all those questions. Or it'll hang at all. I've felt, you look at these, some gossamer fabric, it looks so soft and you feel it and it's like window screen. It's so stiff.
You're not feeling what you're seeing,
That's
kind of
right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's getting back to what you're talking about before. Do you draw inspiration from the fabric, or do you say to yourself, "This the character I'm building this for is a
Right, right.
monster, and it has to be."
I think it's probably 50-50, but usually there's a character, there's who is this person? What should the fabric look like? What should it do? So, and sometimes when I was working at the costume shop, I would just tell them what I needed, and somebody else would go out and buy it. But it wasn't so critical then.
Do you recall any instance of working specifically with an actor and a director to create a costume for them?
When I worked at the costume shop, we never interacted with the directors. The directors never came by, but we would have the designer and some of their lackeys would come by. We did the hats and the clothes for the Fievel the Mouse show at Universal, beginning of the 90s. Somebody else did the fiberglass heads, and we did the bodies and the clothes for them. That was great. We got to a point and we had the designers come in and look at what we'd done to say yay or nay. And one of them was this, I think she was a rat or a cat. I don't know. She was a big lady and she had this big bonnet that had to be like this big. The whole inside of the brim of the bonnet was in ruched pink satin, and the outside was like a purple moire or something with a ruffle. I don't remember. So they came in and the guys, okay, that's great. Can you make it an inch and a half bigger all the way around? Oh yeah, no problem. So I never did. I just left it the way it was because I would have had to take all that fabric part and get either more fabric because it was at least 3 yards of fabric inside this thing. But that's a little secret with the designers. You agree to stuff and then just ignore it.
Let me change focus here for a bit and ask you, if a young one kid comes to you and says, Danny, I want to just learn how to design just like you. What should I do? What would you say to them?
Well, first I'd say you don't want to design just like me. You want to design like you. Take art history lessons. Take theater design. Even if you're never going to do a set in a theater, it's good to know how that all works and look at every set you can find, books, movies, all of that stuff. Look at it all, memorize it. I have one of those brains that remembers images because I
Hmm?
will pull up something and execute it, and then later on I'll see the movie or something that I was influenced from without actually realizing it. And practice. Make little sets for yourself. Set up your own limitations because that's what theater is all about. It's what kind of limitations have we got? 'Cause there's always something: height, width, depth, light, water, no water. Practice, 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 and then do some more.
I'm going to ask a question I asked earlier, but turn it around because I am firmly convinced you can learn as much from failure as you can from
Absolutely,
success.
absolutely.
What set or costume that you look back now upon
Uh,
and now know, oh, I'll never do that again?
Probably there's one I did just like a couple of years ago for the fair at Casa, and I think it was just way too complicated. I wanted to have angles and stuff, so I thought just flats was fine, it doesn't have to have angles and doors and stuff. But we're limited. We can't have anybody more than like 27 inches off the deck, so you can't have second stories or balconies or even windows in a building up high. So that's limiting. But there's, like I said, there's limits. There's always some kind of limit.
Has there been an instance where having a limit made the project better because you had to conform to some fairly arbitrary limit?
I don't think so, because even in college, when we were doing uh, plays in college, we didn't have an actual theater yet. We had a recital hall, which had a stage was like, I don't know, 20 feet wide by 10 feet deep with no backstage, no wings, no flies. Had a door on the left and a door on the right. And it stage didn't just stop, it stepped down because it was a recital hall. So that's how I learned, we had extreme limitations to and they let me design a couple of shows. Did Anything Goes and Night of the Iguana
Well, in a sense, the fair itself is a limitation. I mean, you got to make it look 16th century-ish.
ish.
Actors have to hit the wall and, you know,
Oh yeah. Oh no, we try to make the one of the first things we did when Ray Tatter was the director, they were doing a mystery play and they needed a hellmouth. So Steve Gillen and I built this hellmouth out of wood and stuffed fabric and paint and stuff. And it was sturdy, but then we saw what the damn actors were doing because it had like a drawbridge jaw. They were jumping up and down on it and doing all kinds of stuff. So you have to make a set actor proof.
have you ever uh, been less than stellar in actor proofing your stage?
I don't think so. I don't
They've
think
all
so.
survived.
Yeah. Early on, ages ago at Casa, a set I had. It was mostly Mooney, Phil Johnson, mostly him, and he juggled fire. and there were two pillars that had gargoyles on the top. It was masonry, but then I had real, I think, morning glories. I burnt a couple of the morning glories on the thing just as a joke for him. Because you couldn't really notice it from this audience, but if you were on stage, you saw these burnt leaves on this thing on the side.
Have you ever designed an entire booth?
Actually, yes, it never got built. When we were talking about having a permanent site in Devore,
Hmm.
I designed a booth for Ray Griswold's flower booth, the Green Man Florals. It was 2 stories. The ground floor was only half enclosed, half of it was open. It had a fountain and places to have flowers and a stone floor and things like that. Upstairs would be living and sleeping and storage and stuff.
This is, again, a variation on a question I've asked before, but it's a personal satisfaction.
Uh-huh.
Do you get a greater sense of joy from creating one outfit from one person and seeing how much they enjoy it? Or do you get a greater sense of joy from looking at a stage you've built and the people are all cavorting about it and everybody's laughing?
Yeah, no, it's the stage and not just the actors. When I get feedback from fair participants who've seen it and really, really like it. And the one I got the most from is the storybook stage at Casa. It's a big book. It's, I don't know, 9 feet tall, something like
Hmm.
that. And it's all in forced perspective, this book that's open on the stage. And on the left-hand page, it says, "Once upon a time, dot, dot, dot." And the other side has a door and a stone wall with vines growing all over it. And the door is functional. It's painted to look painted, but it actually opens. I think sometimes their kids are surprised when that door opens. The original idea was the book would be closed. And when the show started, it would open like this and the storyteller would be standing there. But that was a little too complicated. I've gotten more compliments on that. I even got a masterpiece award for that stage up north. But people like it. And part of it was, and this seems odd, but part of it was I would see young adolescent boys come to fair wearing a white shirt and a tie because they anything before they were born is all the same to them. They thought they were dressing in period clothes because it was old-timey. So I was thinking, books are going to be the same way. Kids are going to say, "What's a book?" So I put books up there to show that's where there's a lot of magic in books.
And what's that? I'm sorry.
It opens downstage, so it doesn't
Hmm.
have to have something behind it when they open the door because you can't see into the door. Economy, Because
Well, that's an example of using limits to create
right.
great art through less work.
That's right. What's called economy of means, which is one of my favorite things when I see an illustration where he's used almost nothing and giving you goosebumps. So that's economy of means.
One of the distinctions I've explored in this podcast
Yeah.
is to compare Fair to Disney.
Uh-huh.
And my basic premise is that Fair sort of allows the bottom up type of design as opposed to Disney, which is a very top down. Have you worked at, say, Disney like organizations and have
Mm,
you adapted to them at all?
like probably the closest when I was working for Ross Shoe. Did you know Ross Shoe they were North Hollywood prop rentals, like big props for proms but I was working in the department where we were making mascot costumes. So we were adapting what we knew how to make to whatever their design was. And the one I remember is we were making the characters from the Page Master. There was a fairy and a pirate and a monster, and they were based on a book, and their faces were on the spines of the book, and their arms came out the sides. So we were making walk around costumes based on those designs, which were they gave us in 2 dimensions, just a rendering, not projection or anything, just a rendering. And then when we were almost done, the guy came in with models. Thanks a lot. Little models like this big. Thanks. We're almost done.
That
Um,
would have been helpful.
it would have, because we would have seen it in 3 dimensions. I don't know. It's always a problem with people you're working for that aren't designers or artists. They just can't think of things like that.
Have you worked outside of the fair where you've tried to employ fair gestalt production methods in a non-fair environment?
Probably when I was at the costume shop, because I was doing kilts at the same time I was working at the costume shop. So I did like a Santa throne. We already had this piece that was round and had green velvet arms and a seat, but the back was boring. So I repainted that.
How would you describe, say, the fair way of doing things to someone who is,
Less finished because they were using a lot of signage now that's very slick. I think it's called one shot, which is a highly toxic enamel-y kind of paint that goes on real smooth and you can do all kinds of clever brush strokes and stuff with it. But I think it's too slick and the colors are too saturated. A fair, I always like to gray down the colors.
Mhm.
Using a bright blue, I'll throw in some orange to bring it down. So it's not, because there's a whole story about colors with the Renaissance fair, because you couldn't just go out and buy colors. I mean, you could, but there weren't the colors we know now. The colors we know now are so bright and garish compared to the Renaissance, where things were earthier. You didn't have a aniline red, you'd have iron red. Oh, I always like adding age to stuff, darken the edges or adding dirt. It's actually paint, but it looks like dirt.
I mentioned I was talking, the interview before this was Vicky Nebeker, and
Oh,
she said that distressing clothes was a major skill
oh
that she
yeah.
both
Oh yeah.
acquired and used at the Renaissance Fair.
Yeah, I did some of that at the costume shop with sandpaper and snipping little threads and rubbing colored pastels into stuff to make it look stained.
For a prop, how would you distress paper? I personally was of the dipping paper into lemon water.
I did some of those, but I used paper that's called parchment. It's just sort of a uneven ochre color. For a Celt stage show, they needed a will to fall
Hmm.
out of a Bible. So I did some research and I just wrote some what we call Greeked. It doesn't actually, well, some of it actually said stuff, but I was mostly just writing in letters. And then I folded it and I slashed it and I had a little strip of parchment to tie it together. I don't think I had any wax seals or anything.
One of the other themes of this podcast is that audiences at the fair want to be included and they want to play. Has that been your general experience?
Well, when I'm during the fair, because I don't work during the fair, I just hang out and I talk to the customers. But that's been my experience. Oh, yeah, like the washer well wenches, everybody at that show wants to do something. They're ready. They've either seen them before or heard about them or something, but they want to. And I think people need that because so much entertainment now is just passive, sit there and let it wash over you. You don't have to even think about it.
What do you like to do on the street with a customer?
Well, one of the things I do, there's often be a mom with a
Mhm.
couple of kids standing around and she's handing out money to them. And I will just sort of stand there with my hand in the group. So she sees a hand, but she doesn't really see me. But then they finally, when they do see me, they think it's funny. And it did work once when a lady was handing out chocolate, like Hershey bar or something, broke into little squares. She said, "Oh, here."
Do you have any other little street bits that you like to do to play with
Mhm.
folks?
Mhm. Well, if they're in a period costume and they're dressed, it's just wrong. The way they have it on is wrong. I will tell them who the hell dressed you this morning and rearrange it on them. Especially guys who are wearing a noble outfit and they've got the little capelet. It's tied around their neck instead of being
Uh,
under my arm. That's not how you wear that. Who dressed you this morning? Yeah, fire that servant because they don't know. Most people will rent a costume and they'll just put it on how they think it should go. And they also don't realize people then had help getting them dressed. Because the richer you were, the more complicated your clothes were, and the more you had somebody help you put it on.
How do you deal with, say, a Disney princess or a pirate?
Well, I go along, but especially little girls that are dressed like princesses, I say, you don't want to be a princess. That is a hard job. That is a 24-hour job. You never have time to yourself. You think you're going to have fun. It won't be fun.
Have you
So
ever had any pushback or do they?
they sort of think about it. Usually
Mhm.
they're so young they don't know that they can talk to strangers. But it gives them something to think about, I think. They think being a princess is just a Disney fantasy of singing birds and stuff
Do
like
you
that.
talk to little boys who have wooden swords and Robin Hood hats?
Well, I tell them, keep your point down. Having a sword is a privilege and not a right. And your mom can take that privilege right away from you like that. So be careful. So I saw the best thing I saw. This is one of those categorized as fair magic moments. I was walking down the street and there was a kid like 2.5, 3 years old, standing by his stroller, and he had just gotten, I think it was a wooden sword, and he had a pacifier in his mouth. And I was thinking, kid, you got to decide, is it the sword or the pacifier? And as I got next to him, I didn't say that. I was only thinking it. He turned to his stroller and spat the pacifier into the stroller. And then I went and told his mom what he did. She thought that was great. But that's one of those things that most people wouldn't have even noticed. And I have
What?
a feeling that kid is going to remember that the rest of his life, the sword or the pacifier. But those wooden swords and even the little stuffed soft swords, I wonder how many dads are going to get whacked in the groin with those.
I'm going to do a counterfactual on you. If you had lived in a world without a Renaissance fair, how would your life have turned out?
Ooh, it would be totally different. I would probably be working in a costume shop someplace doing that kind of stuff, designing that kind of stuff. But starting in 2001, the last 20 whatever years, it's been two fairs a year, Northern Fair and Southern Fair, which takes up, it's only actually a month of work, but I
Right.
stay for the whole, to set up, to work for the fair. And uh, God bless her, my boss, she never tells me what I'm going to be doing until I get there. I say, please tell me beforehand so I can at least have it cooking in my head, but she usually waits till I get there. Here, this is what I want you to do. Okay. So I have to schlep a whole library of books with me.
What is your official title at the fair?
Oh, this is a good one. When Fair Play first started at CASA, when they took over from REP or whatever it was called now, I got rehired, basically doing the same thing I was doing before, got rehired as the art director. And I said, can I pick my own title? And Lisa said, oh, sure. So I became the executive esthetician, which doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, but it looks good.
Especially on a business card?
I don't have business cards.
Do you get many people beating it down your door and say, I want to work for the fair?
No. Usually I have to recruit people, and it's people say, I'm not a good enough artist. You don't have to be an artist. You just have to follow directions, don't talk too much, and clean the brushes. That's all you need to do. You don't have to, once in a while, you might have to paint something, but it's very far and few and far between. You don't have to paint anything. But I have a crew, and if I went through all the people I've had working for me, I'd be amazed. But right now, at both fairs, I have Amy Broderson, who's my number one monkey, because I have her climb ladders to paint things up high. Because I'm too old to be standing on top of a ladder painting something. So and people think I'm insulting her by calling her a monkey, but it's a badge of honor to be one of Mr. Garland's monkeys. I think I have probably half a dozen. I will have them do things like stenciling, which I use a lot of when I have a repeat border or something. I'll use a big stencil that I make myself and have them do it, show them how to do it. But I have tricks with my stencils.
What's one thing you would like to see more of at fair?
One of the things that I would like to have more of, but it's harder to do, they did it when they had the ship, was to have what the customer is walking on, having it change. So you feel like you're in a different place. They do it at Disneyland. Each land has its own sort of special kind of pavement. Frontierland has horse hooves and wagon wheels.
Is it pseudo wooden planks or something like
Yeah,
that?
oh no, real wooden planks. But where it's concrete, it's got horse hooves and wagon ruts in it. It's a subtle thing, but where you're what you're standing on changes how you feel about stuff or where you are, your whole idea of the environment.
What other environmental clues does the fair give to being back in time?
Just the dirt. Because I don't think kids walk on dirt anymore. I think it's a different sensation for them. There was a couple of years ago at Casa, it was at the end of a day. It had been a warm day, and it's up in the front by the washerwomen. And somehow there was water in the street, and there were puddles still in the street. And there was this little girl, like 5 or 6 years old, wearing a t-shirt and some little shorts, no shoes, was jumping around in the puddles and having a great time. And her mom, I could see her mom was watching her. And she's probably one of those moms that thought, you play in the dirt, you get exposed to all these germs that you'll develop immunity for later on. But the little girl was having the greatest time just with mud. And then I saw another little girl dressed like a princess with a little cool skirt and jewels and everything, looking at the girl playing in the mud, looking at the mud, looking at the girl. Finally, she decided and jumped both feet into a mud puddle. Then she was sad because her shoes were all muddy. Only at fair.
Only at fair. I'm kind of running out of words, so I'm going to
Me
ask
too.
my final questions. When you were kind enough to say, sure, I'll be interviewed,
Yeah.
was there something in your brain that went, oh, be sure to mention blah, blah, blah? So this
Mm,
is your chance to mention blah, blah, blah.
it's what, 64, 74, 84. It's like 50 years of my life. I think it's to the people. Like most things, it comes down to the people. I'm gonna get choked up. When I get choked up, I can't talk. The kindness of the people, the family feeling, generosity, um, all of that stuff. So that's meant more to me than probably anything else.
And you felt that first time you went at fair and you still feel it
But
today?
I think so, yeah. Um, that same year that I had my mom drop me off at fair, I was going to go to a payphone and call her back. So going out of the fair was a long line of cars going through a field on a dirt road going out. And I'm walking next to them with my sleeping bag that I brought because I was going to spend the night someplace. This is before they had organized camping or anything. You just, sleep someplace. Um, a lady in a car going by said, "Do you need a ride somewhere?" I said, "Yeah, just to call, go to a payphone, call my mom." So she said, "Get in. We're going to these people's house, and you can call from there." And they went to this people, a family, Leonard Brown, who was a writer. He worked on KPFK. He had a show on KPFK. I think he did at least one Star Trek episode, and they're very bohemian. They had, I don't know, four little kids running around. He was making dinner. They were expecting David Osmond to come by because the Firesign Theater was still working at KPFK, and they were associated with the fair too. But he never showed up. But just the people taking me into their home, feeding me, not knowing who the hell I was. The fact that I was at fair and wearing sort of a costume was enough. and they were wonderful. I'm sorry I've lost track of them. I think I went back and saw them another weekend, but I just totally lost track of them.
But you always keep finding people like that if you
Oh,
keep going to
absolutely,
fair.
absolutely. Even now, the last couple of years, I've needed a ride in Irwindale from the fair over to the metro station, which is it's not even a mile maybe, but getting out of the park is a long walk for somebody my age. So I hitchhike out of the fair, and it has never taken more than 10 minutes for me to get a ride from somebody, mostly customers. Sometimes it's somebody I know, but mostly it's customers. I ask them their story, I tell them who I am, and it's still going on, which is great.
Well, I think I will draw this interview to a close and thank you
All right.
very much.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun.
When do I get the check?
Oh, let me tell you, it's well, you have a choice, and I'm going to be honest with you here. I could cut you a check right now,
Yeah.
or we could wait for the residuals to
Well,
come
there you
in.
go.
The
Residuals. Yeah.
residuals and the interest off the
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
that's already there, which
Uh,
is, compounding daily.
right.
I mean, compounding hourly. I mean, even as we speak, it gets more. So it's up to
Yeah.
you.
All
I
right.
can cut you a check right now and I can put it in the mail, or we
I
can
can
just put it in the bank and
I
you
can
can draw on it when you need.
All right. That's great.
So, at any rate, let me push the stop recording button, which that's my August 2024 interview with Danny Garland. I'm your host, Dan McLaughlin, and this has been another episode of Fair Folk at Work. If you would like me to pass along information, questions, or comments to Danny Garland, you can email me them at djng at earthlink.net. If you have questions or comments about the podcast itself, you can email them to me at djng at earthlink.net. If you or somebody you know would like to be a guest on Fair Folk at Work, email me at djng at earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. See you later. Bye bye.